Tokyo. This is Daisuke, and I hope all of you are doing very well. I wanted to bring up a question that I had received some time back from a viewer who has his own YouTube channel. Now, his YouTube name is AllThingsFilm. AllThingsFilm. So it's one word, AllThingsFilm. And he has a YouTube channel which talks about topics relating to film, cinema, movies. And he has a really great taste in cinema. He has a real fondness in particular for silent film. He has a few videos up where he just talks about his love and passion for Chaplin films. And he's talking also about his top 100 films ever. That's not top 10, top 100. And he's just going through his top 100 list, one film at a time. And I think that's an incredible feat because I have trouble putting together my top 10 list, let alone even considering putting together a top 100 list. And so AllThingsFilm is just a fascinating, really fascinating, and I like his very, how shall I put it, he has a very intimate approach to his videos, and he just goes for it, and he doesn't necessarily, there's no, how shall I put it, there's no fluff, if you know what I mean. And I like how he's very direct, and he just is very honest with his opinion. And I think in the end, honesty with one's opinions is the most important thing. And I would strongly urge you, if you haven't already, just to check his channel out and to check some of the videos out that he's been doing. They've been just fantastic. And so he left me this question some time back, which was, Daisuke, so who are your favorite film directors? And that's part of his question. And so he wasn't the only person who's asked me this question. A number of people have asked me this, but AllThingsFilm asked me this in a comment one time, and I haven't actually answered this question yet. So who are my favorite film directors? And I've actually, I do mention a number of directors that I really like and that I'm whose work I'm a huge fan of. But I don't usually list, for instance, my favorite director, my second favorite director, my third favorite director, etc. Because usually I have great difficulty in making up my mind because I'm always very indecisive. And so I've had such a difficult time putting together my list of my top favorite directors ever ranked. It's very difficult for me, and I'm still struggling with it. So if you don't mind, maybe I'll just mention just a few that I can think of off the top of my head, and then we can go from there. And perhaps because I'm mentioning these directors off the top of my head first, that probably is an indication that I like them maybe a little bit more than others. No comment from me on that, but you can make of that what you will. Okay, so in any event, let me think here. So the first director that comes to mind is, and before I forget also, there's one other thing before I answer this question. One of the reasons why I usually hesitate to answer this question, favorite directors, is because I know this isn't true for everyone, but it's true for some. It's true sometimes when I see this discussion take place, for instance, online or something. And it's this. I think it's a very, very valid question, and it's a very important question to consider. And of course, I know that the filmmaking process is very different depending on the crew, depending on the production, etc. So perhaps there's some instances where the producer has more authorship and control creatively over the process than the director. Maybe that's true for That, you know, maybe that's true for certain very famous producers that we've seen in history. Maybe David Selznick comes to mind, perhaps. But I also know, of course, that in other instances, it's the director who has most, if not all, of the authorship. And so I understand in that context the discussion of favorite directors. But I would just throw out there the issue of where does the authorship really lie? And I think that could depend on you know, it just depends on the production and the film itself, and perhaps for some instances, maybe the authorship lies not necessarily in the director's chair, but maybe in the producer's chair, etc. So, or maybe there's a combination of the two. And so I would just throw that out there. And I'm sure AllThingsFilm, I know you are very savvy about this, so I'm sure you've already appreciate this point before I even bring it up. And the other point that I would bring up before, well, with respect to this favorite directors, is it doesn't happen all the time, but once in a while, I sometimes get the sense that whenever the discussion of favorite directors comes up, more often than not, the discussion will be focusing primarily or almost entirely, if not entirely, on directors who have relatively large filmographies. You know, the discussion of a director usually will inherently assume that there is a body of work upon which one can base one's views or opinions on the particular filmmaker. And I think the larger the filmography, usually maybe the more chances that director could be considered in the discussion of favorite directors. I know that's not a perfect corollary. I know that's not perfect, because I know that there may be some directors who have large filmographies who probably are not necessarily included in that discussion, at least in you know, online film fan community circles and the like. But I think my general point is that, generally speaking, maybe the filmmakers with large filmographies tend to get a lot of focus in this kind of conversation. And as a result, the counter is also often the case, which is that filmmakers that have relatively small filmographies, you know, maybe 1 film, 2 films, 3 films, 4 films perhaps, usually don't get mentioned enough in those discussions. And I understand that. I understand that usually, you know, one needs to have a number of films in the filmography to be able to make a better judgment about whether this person is a good director or not. I mean, I understand that point, you know, but we also have to remember that it really depends on the situation, and it depends on the situation of the particular person. Sometimes films can be made which are great, and then after that we don't hear again from that filmmaker, because maybe no other producers would want to take a chance on that filmmaker. Maybe the filmmaker doesn't have the ability to raise money because of certain external forces that are beyond that filmmaker's control. And you know, maybe there's certain biases that exist in the filmmaking industry that could prevent that filmmaker from making another film, even though the films that he or she made prior to that were exemplary and extraordinary. And these sorts of reasons, the list of these reasons can go on and on. So, you know, just because a filmmaker has a relatively small filmography does not necessarily mean that he or she is less of a film artist. It really depends on the circumstances. And so I usually I'm usually, while I'm of two minds whenever I think of the favorite directors discussion. I usually, well, on the one hand, I feel very happy, and I'm always very enthusiastic, and I'm always inspired by others' enthusiasm, because I love to hear these discussions, and I love to hear what people's opinions are, and it's really nice to hear that. But on the other hand, I sometimes feel, oh gosh, it would be nice to hear someone talk about the films of such and such a filmmaker who probably doesn't have that many films under his or her belt, or for whatever reason. And so I always find that I think on that score, I think it's very good to think about a filmmaker's films on the merits, and that for me anyway, it doesn't necessarily mean that the filmmaker needs to have a lot of films under his or her belt. It could help, but I don't think that's the only determining factor, if you know what I mean. And so anyway, that is the situation that I find myself in, which is just trying to focus on the work itself as much as possible. So with all that stuff out of the way, the filmmakers that come to mind that I really, really love in terms of the films and how I respond to them, I'm going to mention a number of filmmakers, and I think my criteria for mentioning these filmmakers is these are the filmmakers for whom I think I love all of the works that I've seen by them. And not like 90%, but I think more or less 100%. I either like or really like or love the works that I've seen by these filmmakers, and there's not one dud. There might be some weak films, but even the weak films are great. So these are the filmmakers that I really, really love fully in terms of what I've seen. So let's see, David Lynch comes to mind immediately. Also, the films of Yasujiro Ozu are great. So therefore Yasujiro Ozu, yes. And this is a new entry, but the filmmaker Naoko Ogigami comes to mind immediately. And also Victor Arise comes to mind immediately. Oh gosh, there are so many others. Edward Yang, yes, of course, Edward Yang. I think all of his films are astounding, and so yes, Edward Yang. I think I could come up with some more, I suppose, but those are the ones that just come to mind immediately without any notes. So, and if I could go back to AllThingsFilm's second part of his question, so he asked me what were some of my favorite directors, and so there's the first part of his question. Then the second part of his question is, of your favorite directors, which are the films from those directors that you like the least? And I thought that was a very interesting question. So if we go back to the filmmakers that I mentioned first, which was the ones that I love wholly, so these are filmmakers like Lynch and Ogigami and Ozu and Edward Yang. For instance, I would say for filmmaker Edward Yang, oh gosh, what would be the one that I like least? It's a good film. It's a really good film, but it's one. Mahjong is probably the one that I think is it doesn't. Well, let me take it back. I think it works very well, but I think it takes a while for it to kick in. And once it does, it really is quite powerful. But I think for me, that's the one that takes the most time. And then for maybe Ozu, yeah, probably the one that I really like it. I really, really like it, but this is also a film that takes a lot of time for me to get into whenever I see it, and that's the film Tokyo Twilight. And it's a very, I think it's a very peculiar film in many respects, and it's difficult because there's a lot of, there are a lot more unlikable characters in that film than usual. But that's not to say it's a bad film, I think, and that's not to say that the unlikable characters are bad people. You know, there are unlikable people in life, and that's life. So it's just a reflection of life, I think, more than anything else. So it just takes me a little bit more time to get into it. Oh gosh, Ogigami, the works of Ogigami. I think the film Toilet is the one that it's hard for me to get into, although I do see a lot of great things about that film, and I think it's a fine film. And I don't hate it. I think it's really quite moving. It's just does take a while, and I think the second half of that film is actually much better than the first half. So, the toilet, but still, it's a really fine film, and there are some tender moments in that film, and it touches me in a way that is quite unexpected. But Naoko Ogigami's film Toilet. Then there is the filmmaker, who am I forgetting? David Lynch, of course. Yeah, so David Lynch, this might be, maybe some people might be disappointed for what I'm about to say, but I really love the film, don't get me wrong, but if I had to pick the one that I liked the least, probably it would be The Elephant Man. And I say that it pains me to say that because I love The Elephant Man very much, but I think it's just The Elephant Man is in a group of films that are just so much more. I think there's so much going on, and there's so much interest, and it sparks so much interest in me that I tend to be drawn towards the other films more than I am towards The Elephant Man, more often than not. And that, again, that's on me, and that's perfectly and completely and 100% my own fault and my own weakness. But I'm a huge fan of Dune. I love Dune. I think David Lynch's Dune is one of those. It's one of the most unique film viewing experiences, and there are a lot of flaws in the film, but I really find it to be a fascinating and just utterly mind-boggling escape. And there are other great films and works by David Lynch that I will always cherish. I mean, I've already mentioned my love for the film Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I already mentioned, well, maybe I haven't, but I'm so much in love with the film The Straight Story. I find that to be just one of the most dazzling films I've ever seen in the past several years. And it really is a shining example in Lynch's body of work. And I haven't mentioned it either, but I am a big fan of Twin Peaks, and so The Return, the latest, the Showtime limited event series, is probably I mean, one of these days I really must talk about Twin Peaks, but that series, that return, I mean, Twin Peaks as a whole is great. It's epic, it's momentous, and it's intimate. But that new series, it could be, in many ways, for me, could be the greatest thing Lynch has ever done. I'm not sure, but it's truly a one-of-a-kind masterpiece, and it's like one huge, gigantic film that Lynch made, and he just divided it up into these segments. But it's a gargantuan, mind-boggling, superb masterpiece. But what am I talking about? But yeah, so The Elephant Man, yes, of course, The Elephant Man. So I love The Elephant Man, but I'm sorry, Elephant Man fans out there. It's just that that's probably the one that I like the least of Lynch's films. So yes, so All Things Film. Sorry about taking all this time to answer your question, but I hope that does answer your question. And maybe I'd throw it back at you and to others too. What are the filmmakers that you like? And of their filmographies, which films would you say that you like the least? Or maybe put it another way, which of those films do you think that you have the hardest time connecting with, or that maybe it takes longer for you to connect with than other films? So yes, thank you very much. And for anyone else, please feel free to comment below. And I do like to answer questions it's hard to answer all questions from everyone in a YouTube video, so please understand I don't do that for everything. But if people oftentimes give me great questions, and so I wish I could answer all of them in a video form, but usually I have to try to pick and choose. But please feel free to leave behind any questions that you wish, and perhaps I might want to address them in a video like this. So yeah, so thank you very much. And once again, please feel free to check out AllThingsFilm. That's a great YouTube channel, so please check it out if you can. Okay, my friends, until we meet again, take care and cheers.